We are demanding that more capital go to the street. And remember, poverty and hunger is no more black or white. It's now South African. The UIM is not just here when it's election time. In actual fact, my strategy is to be around less at election time and more after election time. And then this matter about posters. A guy asked me, where's my t-shirt, where's my poster? I said, I have taken a decision with the rest of the leadership, with the rest of the regional organizations, that we will rather take the money that we push out on t-shirts and caps and start soup kitchen feeding programs to the people that don't have. But they sit with a t-shirt and a kepi. That alone is 150 rand. You wore that once in the elections and then? So no, we are demanding that more capital go to the street. And remember, poverty and hunger is no more black or white. It's now South African. So let's put more effort in feeding our nation, creating job opportunities, and fighting crime. And that's the slogan. Moenie ons slogan vergeet nie vir hierdie verkiesing. Jobs and justice. No matter your race, no matter your background, then as of tomorrow at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, you can send an email from the youth. Now, what is the jeug? Anybody under 30 years old. I don't care. If you're under 30, you are youth as far as we are concerned. So, enigiemand onder 30, as jy in die jeug groep, if you want to join the youth league of this entity, from tomorrow morning, UIM Youth at uimsa.org. Send your ideas right to Devon. Tell him what you want. He's our national youth leader. We need you. We need you out of Khayelitsha, Kayamandi, Welkom, Magaliesburg, Wesrand, Rodepoort, Mosselbaai, Kaapstad, Blouberg, Outeniqua, Drakensberg, Durban. If you are willing to join a fresh approach, a new beginning of youth, a new political era and genre, join us, because we are going back to the street. And this time, we are not going to go as white, as black, as colored, as Indian. We are going to the street as South Africans.
Yeah, really interesting from Neil de Beer. I love the fact that he says that poverty is no longer black or white, but it's now South African. And that's a really, really ideological statement, because it sort of like de-emphasizes the notion that one race owns a certain negative social problem from the other. And I don't know if probably some of you might think that might be true, that might be a fact or a non-fact from Neil de Beer, but it's really interesting to have this perspective that hunger and poverty is no longer black and it's no longer white. And for me, this is really striking, because spending over a decade in outside Africa, I've lived like an outsider for a really long time. And so that's why one of the reasons why South African politics really interests me so much, because I'm having to understand life as an outsider and looking at society from an outsider. I think the outsider perspective many times is that missing puzzle to understanding the entire complexity of things in society. And so in Neil de Beer's case, for example, attributing poverty and hunger as not just a black property, but also now a white and Indian, a South African property, I think it's a really smart way to understand the weakness of race and colorism in trying to understand the evolution of humanity, in that regard. And so I was really shocked when I saw also a documentary. I don't remember his name, but I love watching his documentary. I think the name of the title of the channel on YouTube is either Top Stories or stories, something about, crime. He speaks about, he makes mini documentaries on crimes in the US, in Mexico, and there's this really powerful documentary on South Africa and, the rainbow concept, the rainbow nation, and all of that. And I thought that was really interesting to really see suburbs and townships that are really dominated by what we would term white people or white South Africans, or what could be seen as white South African townships. And for me, that was really new. That was really strange, because in West Africa, you hardly see things like that. You see, and there's a really easy way to assume that poverty and hunger is attributed to a certain group of people, based on color and not the other, so to speak. Like there's a term used, mostly a term called social exclusion. Social exclusion was the way to rebrand what poverty meant in the West, but rather than attribute the term social exclusion, and rather than attribute the term poverty to Westerners, or what would be generally termed white people, it had to be tweaked to inculcate this notion of social exclusion. But but here, Neil de Beer is actually problematizing that and actually saying that poverty and hunger actually can be seen as an attribute of whiteness. It can be seen as an attribute of blackness, and he's zoning all of that into a South Africanness to really bring forth that whole idea of a rainbow nation, of the rainbow concept. And I think the reason why South Africa is placed on the continent of Africa is really strategic. There's a reason for that. I'm not able to explain it, but I think there's a really interesting reason, maybe by fate, maybe by a universal, arrangement, so to speak. But there's a reason why such a multiracial society is located deep in, I wouldn't want to say the heart of Africa, but it's almost like at a really strategic place in the continent that's generally perceived to be, owned or, populated by black people. And it gives a really interesting flavor to understanding democracy and what democracy represents, and this whole idea of the people and the power of the people. And when we see color mixing in what the people represent, then South Africa gives us a really interesting floor, a really interesting space to see the evolution of humanity, the evolution of especially racism, because South Africa now gives that space to understand how race can be understood globally, from a global standpoint, and of all places in Africa in itself. But what do you guys think about this speech by Neil de Beer? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe, because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history, and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.